There were four main dictators during World War II. First, Italy, then Germany, Japan, and the Soviet Union. Dictators are also known as absolute rulers. You know this from previous units. So, remember, a dictator is someone who takes complete power over a country and everything is run by them and they make every single decision. As we know from the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was treated very severely after World War I. They were stripped of their territory, meaning that they had to give it back. They were also forced to get rid of all of their weapons stock, and they had to take responsibility and pay for all of the damage caused during World War I. Also, during the Worldwide Depression that we talked about earlier, people began to look for new leaders to solve their problems. People were looking for new leadership because of so many economic problems they felt that they needed to change. Mussolini was the ruler of Italy. He preached a government called fascism, which is intense patriotism and nationalism. So, we know that nationalism is a feeling of pride in one's country. So this is a exaggerated version of that. And it's very much linked to racism and cultural superiority. Fascism is also an example of totalitarianism, where the government controls every aspect of life. In 1935, Mussolini will order his Italian troops to invade Ethiopia, which is in Africa. A lot of other nations, including the Allied powers, were really shocked by his actions, but no one actually tried to turn back the invasion. They just were hoping that he would take over and that would be it. Adolf Hitler was the leader of the Nazi Party in Germany. He often spoke about German racial superiority, and his main goal was to get revenge for Germany's loss during World War I. He felt that Germany was very much mistreated in the Treaty of Versailles, and that it was his job to make Germany great again. Because Germany had huge suffering from the war debt. Also, they experienced massive unemployment and hyperinflation. So in 1932, the Nazis became the largest party in Germany. And then in 1933, Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. So he basically became like the president. Their first job, they eliminated political parties. So anyone who could oppose them, they got rid of them. And to monitor the citizens, they used a secret police called the Gestapo. His goal was to create a master race. The master race were known as Aryans, and they were supposed to be a pure race. Non-Aryans, especially Jewish people, were considered inferior. This would include the mentally and physically handicapped, communists, anyone who did not look physically like an Aryan, so anyone who was not white, anyone who was a homosexual, anyone who was not a Christian, and anyone who did not believe the same things politically. So, in Germany, they created the Nuremberg Laws, which took away all of the civil rights of the German Jews. So, they couldn't have a right to own their own property, they couldn't vote, and they didn't have any protection under the law. Kristallnacht was also enacted, which means Hitler ordered a night of violence against the Jews, and this is where thousands of businesses and homes were attacked. They call it the Night of Broken Glass, Kristallnacht, because all of the windows were broken, so there's all this glass in the street. There's also the Night of the Long Knives, when Hitler removed his political enemies, and this included all of the communists and the other democratic leaders. So he made sure that there was no one who could oppose him politically and take away his power. There was a creation of the German-Italian alliance, and this formed the Rome-Berlin Axis. This is where they become the Axis powers. First, it was just Germany and Italy. And the Axis powers helped Spain's fascist military overthrow its elected government. So this was known as the Spanish Civil War. So the Axis powers were going to help overthrow governments and create their own land. Hideki Toho was in Japan. Militarists would seize control, so the military overthrew the existing government. Hideki would become the general and the prime minister of Japan. He would make himself leader, and he was actually the one who organized the attack of Pearl Harbor. And he would eventually join the Rome-Berlin Axis and become one of the major Axis powers. So he made some changes in Japan that were very similar to in Germany and Italy. He had a creation of a secret police. Nationalism was at an all-time high, meaning that you had to be a certain type of citizen. He also promoted the idea of racial superiority, so a pure race, no mixing. And he was part of the expansionist movement, meaning that he believed that if they were going to have a pure race and they were going to create this amazing country, then they wanted to expand that and take over other lands so they could do the same thing there. Joseph Stalin was the leader in Soviet Union. So before him, a man, John Lennon, was the controller of that area. But when he died in 1924, Lenin originally wanted Trotsky to take over. However, Stalin bullied, threatened, and murdered his way into power. So he killed all those loyal to Trotsky, and eventually he had Trotsky himself killed. So Stalin designed a 5-year plan to catch and overtake the leading capitalist countries. To do this, he was going to take control of every single area of his country. He restricted all of the media, which is censorship, and he restricted travel so people couldn't come and go when they wanted. He also created a secret police, and he had government-controlled courts. So the government would decide who was guilty and who was not guilty instead of a jury. Millions would die under Stalin, both by executions and labor camps. Labor camps, also known as concentration camps, were not only used by the Germans, but by Joseph Stalin and the Soviet Union. He was the leader of Russia, and Russia will become communist, the communist Soviet Union after World War I. He controlled every aspect of people's lives. He eliminated all of his competition to stay in power. He was also a very paranoid person who tried to control everyone, and he often killed people he thought were a threat to his power. So he got rid of most of his best officers and politicians, so there would be no one to oppose him.